I'm a university student in Calgary. I chose to focus my undergraduate thesis project on the film industry here in our city. My hope is to work in the industry, but I don't want to have to move my family to stay employed. I don't have enough opportunity yet for stable full-time work here, and I'm not alone.
I've worked in the film industry for about 3 years. I left because there's not enough work and it's really competitive.
In one of the unions, 40% of their members have been lost over the last 3 to 5 years. We have 4 crews working in Alberta right now, and we have 7 Alberta crews working in BC.
The challenges we face in 2019 are retaining our crew base and attracting producers in a marketplace that's not as stable as some of the other successful production jurisdictions, such as Ontario and British Columbia, specifically Toronto and Vancouver.
So why are Toronto and Vancouver so successful with their film industry, and why isn't Calgary? What needs to change in order that we become a major Canadian film centre? To answer these questions, I decided to do a comparative analysis of the film industry in Toronto, Vancouver, and Calgary. I did some research and I talked to some experts. Let me take you with me as I tell you what I learned. When researching Calgary's film industry, I decided to use what's called a SWOT analysis tool, where I look at strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. It will give us a useful framework in talking about some of the key points that need to be addressed. First, let's look at some of Calgary's strengths. We should feel good about the fact that we in Alberta have had a number of successful film and television productions made here.
You have talent and crew here that have more Emmy, Golden Globe, and Oscar wins than in any jurisdiction in Canada in the last 15 years.
We have a diverse array of locations. Going east to Drumheller, you've got the Hoodoos and a really dry look. You could get Planet Mars look there. And then going west, of course, we've got beautiful vistas and mountains, and we've got rolling hills, and then we've got the civic centers of Edmonton and Calgary. So there's really a diverse array of locations that are attractive. You add to that our proximity to the production centers of Los Angeles and Vancouver are direct flights offered daily. Calgary is an attractive place to shoot movies.
We have more sunny days per year than any other major Canadian city, and our climate is fairly moderate. We have great transportation routes in and around Calgary, and we're close enough to Vancouver to be able to pick up the spillover when they are at capacity.
What we've done here in Calgary to try to be more attractive and be more competitive is obviously the Film Centre being created in 2016, a very attractive component, folks being able to walk into the Film Centre and start their production immediately.
We have competitively low corporate and small business income tax rates, but we have the major advantage of no provincial sales tax in Alberta, the only province in Canada for which this is true. Calgary's cost of living is also much less than Toronto and Vancouver, making it an affordable alternative for people working in the industry. Let's move on to some of our weaknesses. One area that we probably could do better in is to have a dedicated approach to marketing and access to information for potential producers regarding incentives. A natural place to look for this is the Alberta Films website. It's actually part of the Provincial Ministry of Culture and Tourism. If we follow the link for the screen-based production grant from the main site, we get an error message. For someone looking for information about filming in Calgary, that's a big deterrent. In contrast, both BC and Ontario have dedicated portals for affiliates to find relevant and important information. Links are active and information is easy to locate. We certainly have other weaknesses, some beyond our control, like the unpredictable Chinooks in the winter. But by far what we really need to look at are the production incentives in Alberta. Let's look at it from the perspective of a Hollywood film producer exploring options to film in Alberta. Well, I like the low Canadian dollar right now. Your Canadian healthcare saves us a lot of money in the production costs. You've got the diversity of landscapes in Alberta, the Film Centre in Calgary, and you're just a short flight away from us in LA. So, I could definitely see myself doing some work there. Well, in Alberta, we do have the screen-based production grant that you might be eligible for.
Great. Is it like the usual refundable tax credit?
Well, not really.
Oh?
In Alberta, it's an all-spend grant, so eligible expenses include anything incurred in Alberta, not just labor costs.
I see. So I can bring my own crew with me.
Yeah, and you can get up to 26% of your eligible expenses, or up to $7.5 million, whichever is less.
If I do the math, that means that if I want to get the most out of this grant, then I only need to spend roughly $28 million in Alberta. Is there any benefit to me if I spend any more?
No, but if you do, it could increase the likelihood of getting approved.
Okay, so how do I get the money?
Well, there is an application process,
I see.
and there's only 4 windows of 30 days each year that you can apply.
Okay, so this means that I have to plan my shoot around the schedule of the grant if I need that money.
Yes, and keep in mind, it's a competitive process, which means that there's only a total of $45 million that the Alberta government is willing to give out across all applications each year.
So even if I'm approved and I get selected, I have no guarantee that the money isn't going to run out on another production. You know, it doesn't sound that attractive when you put it that way.
I think one of the biggest challenges for the film industry in Alberta right now would be that the screen production grant system in place has a cap on it, and it's not predictable for producers.
Financially, we are not quite as competitive as we'd like to be globally. We have a unique system for applying and accessing incentives or funding here in Alberta, which is different than most jurisdictions on the planet. And it makes things a little bit more challenging. It's a bit cumbersome compared to some of the other jurisdictions that we compete with, where it is a tax incentive or a tax credit or a tax rebate incentive that's allocated. There is some definite disadvantages with the manner in which we engage and allow people to apply for the grant.
Is it any wonder that in many of Alberta's skilled production labor have sought employment in BC and elsewhere? There isn't enough work for them here because big productions are simply going elsewhere, drawn by much more attractive incentives than our current grant program. Let's move to opportunities now. Opportunities are the possibilities that allow us to address our weaknesses, build on our strengths. Let's look at some key changes that are needed in what we have been doing, and let's also look at how we can capitalize on some major shifts that are happening in the film industry beyond our borders that can help us grow. The first step is to eliminate the all-spend grant as it currently exists in Alberta.
The all-spend grant is a much richer model than the British Columbia and Ontario models. Alberta, at a 30% all-spend, spends about $7.5 million per 25 million of production, whereas in British Columbia the number is a lot lower than that. So they actually get more bang for their buck.
Then, create a set of tiered and targeted incentives that do not have caps.
Caps don't exist in Ontario and British Columbia and Quebec, which are the 3 most successful jurisdictions. If you can find a way to remove those caps, you bring massive stability and growth. That's already proven. Those markets make that case. Here in Alberta, we do not have massive growth. We have peaks and valleys. And if you exceed the cap per project or annually, you've got a problem, you've got uncertainty. People don't want to invest in a jurisdiction that can't guarantee them what they're going to get.
The incentives should be labor-based, with the intention of helping develop and sustain film-related employment in Alberta.
In British Columbia, they use a labor-based rebate, and it's essentially a lot cheaper per million for the British Columbia government to incentivize production.
Incentives should be tiered to different production budget levels, and they should be targeted to the growth of specific dimensions of the film industry, like post-production, screenwriting, special effects, or others.
You know, when I think about Vancouver, Toronto, and Quebec, these jurisdictions have very generous post-production incentives, and it's one of the fastest growing sectors of our industry.
Third, the industry is changing, and Calgary is open to these new changes. We have a really big opportunity to be on the forefront of the new world. Online distribution and video on demand services like Netflix and YouTube need to feel welcomed and encouraged to film here.
I think the whole model is changing. It's changed so dramatically in the last 10 years. And it's really got the studios are on their heels.
Lastly, let's look at developing a provincial strategic plan that specifically targets the development of the film industry with SMART goals. Maybe we need a committee that's accountable for the implementation of this strategic plan that addresses some things like how we can promote the province as environmentally friendly, or the development of a dedicated portal for film industry affiliates that is current and user-friendly. Finally, let's look at threats. In the SWOT analysis, threats are the external considerations, things that we don't have control over, but we still need to be aware of in order to plan for success. A big concern everywhere is how public money is spent, especially in a struggling economy. Politicians are particularly sensitive to how voters perceive the spending of the public purse.
Here in Alberta, we have a 30% all spend, which is a very generous one. So if you're selling the industry to the marketplace, you want that number to be high. And if you're the government, you want to go as low as you can on that number because you have to demonstrate return on investment.
We first have to educate both voters and elected officials about the benefit of a change to our incentives, and then start with proven methods of success and work towards even better models. And yes, there are some producers who are actually benefiting from the current all-spend grant and don't necessarily want to see any changes. They either are very small and don't exceed the grant cap, or they come from outside Alberta with their own crews and leave again with the grant check in hand. We don't necessarily want to discourage small productions, but we may want to look at a tiered system of tax credits that are geared to different levels of productions, similar to what's happening in Ontario and BC. The fact is, we aren't attracting a lot of big productions, and we're missing a huge opportunity. It was really reassuring to me that the experts that I consulted with supported my ideas and the conclusions that I have come to. When I first started researching, I didn't anticipate how important this was or how many people are impacted.
Keep Alberta Rolling is a nonprofit based in Alberta, and our mandate is to get awareness out that Alberta has a film industry and also that it does a lot of good for the province, whether that's for Albertans or businesses based in Alberta by creating different jobs and also stimulating the economy of local communities, whether it's even bigger cities like Calgary, Edmonton, but also lots of smaller regions like High River, Okotoks, Cochrane. They all can see a benefit from film production. And we want to share the stories of Albertans that benefit from the industry in one way or another and let other Albertans know that the industry here does a lot of good for them.
We have an opportunity to build this important industry right now.
I really think now is the time. I think government's looking to diversify our economy and to bring jobs. This should be their target. This is low-hanging fruit. The working models are on either side of us in Manitoba, Ontario, and British Columbia. And I think there's a sweet spot where the government can get a better return on investment, a more efficient rebate system.
The return on the investment is excellent. We generate more jobs per million than any other sector in the province.
This industry is growing in leaps and bounds, and there's an opportunity in Alberta to find that leaner model that will give the government the confidence they need and still be a high enough number to attract the producers to come in. We already know what those numbers are because those numbers are used in Ontario and in British Columbia. They're working models, they're generating lots of jobs, and they're growing those industries. We need that here.
We need to have a system that guarantees they're going to have work year-round and that they can feed their kids, pay their mortgage, and pay their taxes here. We have jurisdictions around us that can guarantee that to people.
I think one of the best things that Albertans can do to help the industry here is to share the stories that are out there of Albertans in the film industry. So going to keepalbertarolling.ca and finding some of those stories that relate to you and sharing them with someone that's maybe not in the industry or doesn't have any connection to the industry, but maybe a friend or a family member, someone who works in oil and gas or healthcare or something unrelated, and just let them know that there are these great stories out there of Albertans working in the screen industry, and just creating awareness of it. And with that, you could also reach out to your local MLAs and let them know as well that you're a supporter of the film industry.
This is the most important discussion in my world. You think I'm representing 1,000 people with $50 million in wages? That could become 100 if we get this right, or it could become 0 if we get it wrong.
I think one of the challenges facing the Alberta screen industry right now, it's a very boom and bust cycle. So we'll have a large uptake in productions and then virtually nothing for a long period of time, which can create a lot of strain on those working in the industry.
So dead right now that they have no work. There's like no jobs, so it forces people to go to like Toronto or LA or Vancouver, and we should be able to sustain our people here.